Because there's no fat to be trimmed from the federal government in discretionary spending. There's none. Nothing. There's nothing happening that we can do away with on the federal level except cutting money from the poor kid or the disabled kid. This is when we need Republicans to talk turkey about what these people are doing and calling them out and shaming them for holding this type of real aid up from people who really need it when it's completely unnecessary. You're listening to your Healthy Radio Addiction, The Laura Ingraham Show. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, also Facebook. We have a raging debate going on Facebook and Twitter about 2016, believe it or not. People are watching Rubio and Cruz. I'm watching Scott Walker from Wisconsin. Garrett will remember the day that I said this because everyone's following Cruz and Rubio, and I like both of them, don't get me wrong. But I'm watching the quiet progress made by Governor Walker, and I wrote about that on the website. I want you to check it out. Joining us now is a man that liberals love to hate, so of course he's my friend. His new book, The Last Line of Defense, The New Fight for American Liberty, Ken Cuccinelli, with a name like that, you got to love him because I love the Italian people. Ken Cuccinelli, the Attorney General of the great Commonwealth of Virginia, and, of course, wants to be the next governor from this state that has seen its share of Republican losses in recent years, of course, in the presidential elections. Obama wins twice in Virginia, which was a stake through the heart of the Republican Party. How can this be turned around? Ken Cuccinelli joins us now. Ken, great to talk to you. How are you?
Good to be with you, Laura.
So you heard it. The president down in Newport News, he had the big wallpaper of the ship builders behind him. He had all the hard hats and so forth, and they look like they'd rather be anywhere but standing there. But nevertheless, the president just pulled out all the stops, and he said, "This is all going to come to an end if we reduce the growth of spending." Your reaction?
Well, first of all, I have a funny feeling, given where he was, that we are going to continue to service the nuclear reactors that come into port, regardless of what happens on Friday. But being in Virginia, we're going to take the hardest hit from all of this, and certainly the government is spending more than it's taking in. You just can't do that for very long, and cuts have to happen. But the notion that we're just going to slap a blindfold on and the first thing we're going to put on the block is defense and take a meat cleaver to it without even thinking about it is a pretty silly way to go about it. All the while, while they're fighting over their books and these amounts of money, their administrative agencies are out there pushing the outer envelope of the law, trampling the Constitution frequently, and the president is too. He lost last month in that National Labor Relations Board case I'm sure you talked about, and proving that this is the biggest set of lawbreakers that we've seen running the federal government in our lifetimes.
Well, there are people out there today who believe that the answer for conservatives is essentially to be less conservative and, well, have a different tone, have a different approach, but really have different ideas. And this was said recently on MSNBC about you.
Cuccinelli. The guy is certifiable when it comes to Medicare. He attacks Medicaid. He attacks Social Security. This is a guy that has said more things that will offend the voters that swing elections than is humanly possible.
Your reaction to old Joe?
Well, old Joe in the old days used to be Republican, and now he's on MSNBC. So, what can you say? It's I've been elected 3 times in the most liberal part of Virginia without sacrificing my principles, Northern Virginia, Fairfax County, west of Washington, D.C., for your listeners, and barely on my last one, but that's without sacrificing my principles and my support for things like advancing school choice, for conservative solutions to transportation, for pro-growth economic policies, even when that brings me in conflict with other Republicans. And there are just some people who don't like that, and they don't want us to survive this way. And now I'm running for governor, bringing the same principles to the governor's race And they underlie what we were talking about in the book, The Last Line of Defense. I mean, the principles never change. The principles don't change. Their application changes. You know, a lot of people on the other side complain, the founders never foresaw the Internet. Well, that's true, but they certainly understood tyranny, and they put in place a structure they hoped would restrain it and protect liberty. And those of us out in the States have a major role in making sure that liberty is protected right now against the federal government, which was supposedly set up also to protect that liberty. But, you know, the founders thought we had a role to play, and we're playing it very actively. And in the Last Line of Defense, we walk through example after example of where these fights are popping up, and we're fighing back. We're often winning.
One thing I liked in this book, and believe it or not, we've actually read your book, and on 164, you talked about the value in fighting. There was always value in fighting. And I bring that up because there are lots of people, and you were talking about the healthcare reform, why you had to go to court, even if you ultimately lost that horrifically disappointing decision by the Supreme Court last summer, that fighting at every point, it has inherent value to it. And I was on Twitter today, and people were saying, well, the Democrats are going to have a 3-point plan to take over Texas. They want Texas to be blue next time around. And so my point on Twitter is, why aren't we fighting for California? We need to fight everywhere. This idea that you can just blow off huge electoral treasure troves and just say, well, that's down the tubes, California, or we're going to lose. We lost health care, so let's forget that. And it's now illegal immigration. Everyone wants for amnesty, so forget that. Then what do you become as a party, as a philosophical movement? What are you?
Yeah, you got to stand for something, or you'll fall for anything. The value in fighting is not for the heck of it, but it's for the purpose of it, and the purpose is the principles you're fighting for. I mean, you can go back to the Ratification Convention. I'm in Virginia, so I'll tell you about Virginia. And James Madison vehemently believed there was no need for a Bill of Rights. Vehemently. He said the Constitution doesn't say that the government can do it, so they can't. And people like Patrick Henry wanted to rein in the federal government even more. Patrick Henry and almost half of the Virginians in that convention voted against the Constitution. The only reason James Madison got the Constitution ratified in Virginia is because he promised to pursue a Bill of Rights. He conceded, not that it was necessary, but that he would go get it just to get the vote. So Patrick Henry lost the vote. He lost the vote. He voted against the U.S. Constitution. But James Madison kept his word, and he went and got that Bill of Rights. Patrick Henry forced that even when he lost. And while we lost the health care case, we won 3 of the 4 constitutional arguments. And one of the things we won gave us the ability to say no to the Medicaid expansion. Now, whether every state does or doesn't is going to be another question, but that was not an open question until we fought that health care fight. So we got some wins out of there, even though the law still stands. So there is value to fighting for principles, even when the odds are long.
Well, I mean, that's always been my mantra, and I learned it from Ronald Reagan, my old boss. There was no time that was darker for conservatives than 1964, really. I mean, and you saw all these wonderful people like Brent Bozell Sr. and Russell Kirk and then Buckley, and all these people get together and they start the American Conservative Union. And they decided that the Republican Party needed to be shaken up, and that they went down in the trenches, did the hard work. Took them a long time, but they were able to rebuild it and changed the world forever as a result. And so for all the moderates that are listening out there, and well, if you don't evolve, Cuccinelli, you're done. And people like Gary Shapiro, he was quoted in the I guess in the Washington Post op-ed, he said that he wouldn't support you, even though he supported Mitt Romney, because you've led the tilt rightward in Virginia, even though Virginia is a purple or maybe even blue state. So he tags you. He blames you for that.
An interesting aspect of that is I worked very hard for Mitt Romney. And, one of the problems that conservatives often have at grassroots activists is they wonder, is this a one-way street? when they don't get what they want at the nomination level, some of them, take their tent and go home, like Gary. And, others pitch in, just like I pitched in last year for our candidates, George Allen in Virginia and Mitt Romney. And, there does need to be a certain amount of team effort, and within a party, there needs to be some room for disagreement. But that does also mean that when those of us who believe in first principles and want to implement them consistently and firmly win, that we need to be backed up too. And so far, the reaction I'm getting from the grassroots space is very positive. It's very strong across the Republican spectrum. I'm very happy with it. What you read in the Washington Post is, it's the Washington Post. What else do I need to say?
Yeah, well,
and we'll have support at the base across the spectrum. And I would also note, back to the book, the Pew Research folks just came out with a survey. They do these all the time. For the first time, they found a majority of Americans actually believe that the federal government is a threat to their rights and their freedoms. The American people are with us in what we wrote about in the last line of defense. They believe that we are right and that we need to fight for liberty against the federal government right now. And, you don't have to go very far to see where it works. The NLRB case last month,
yeah, but nobody knows.
EPA.
Right.
I beat the EPA last month. It was a $300 million case.
You did, and I will say that I think most Americans don't know what the NLRB case is, number one. Number two, I think they fear you.
They need to read my book.
Okay. They fear you, though, because you kind of put your head down and you defy the elites on issue after issue, whether it's immigration or Medicaid expansion, increased gas tax, even you go against McDonald. Well, you put your head down and you just do what you think is right. They don't like that. That's very threatening to people who will evolve at every turn. So the fact that they're hitting you as hard as they're hitting you, in a way, that's a badge of honor, but you have to be careful because they did that to George Allen. When he ran for president, he had his macaca moment, and they're going to be lying in wait for you, Ken Cuccinelli, because they want the same thing to happen to you, and the Washington Post is the most liberal, committed, left-wing newspaper when it comes to Virginia politics. I've never seen anything like it. The coverage is so biased, and I know people are like, why are you surprised, Laura? There's not even an attempt to be biased. Objective, excuse me.
Unbiased,
yeah,
right.
Not even one shred of an attempt.
Yeah, I'll tell you, though, what I learned in running statewide is that the Washington Post is the third worst paper in Virginia. The Roanoke Times and the Virginia Pilot have it beat. So they've got the three corners of Virginia covered in that respect.
Yeah.
And we have a governor's race, and if people want to help, they can go to Cuccinelli.com. Love to have the help there. But the principles that we wrote about in the book are also going to underlie our campaign.
Great.
They have my AG campaign and my time in office as AG,
Well,
fighting the health care, fighting EPA, fighting the National Labor Relations Board. Whenever they break the law, we're there. We're there.
Well,
and unfortunately,
I love it.
this has become more common.
Yeah,
so.
Ken Cuccinelli. And you having fun out there? Everyone's like, Ken's so serious, needs to be a happy warrior, needs to smile more. That's what the girls are all saying.
Enjoy it.
That's what all the girls are saying here, Attorney General Cuccinelli.
Well, those are the ones I listen to. So.
Spoken as a true husband and father. Ken
That's right. Of 5 daughters. That's
I know.
right.
5 girls. God must have thought you were a good dad for girls because you certainly got a lot of them. We'll take a break. Ken Cuccinelli, we have your book on our website, Last Line of Defense. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right, we'll take a break on the Laura Ingraham Show. Stay with us.
Transmit hits with